Welcome to
Good.
another edition of Success Talk. This is Dr. Herbert Harris, and as you know, we always interview exciting people, people who have done unusual things, who've overcome incredible odds, and who have come out on top, who've been successful in not everything, but anything they really wanted to make happen. And so today we have, let me tell you something, a very unique person, Rex White. Rex, welcome to Success Talk.
Thanks for having me, Doc. I appreciate that. Happy to be here.
Well, I tell you, Rex, when I was looking at your LinkedIn profile and, some conversations, you are in a very unique business that what would you call it? Like food supply?
Yeah, I would call it seafood. It's food supply, but it has facets to it because I've created products within the industry. So I have two restaurant concepts, and then I have sauces and spices that support the restaurants. The goal is to get into supply chain. So
Mm,
I'll leave it right there. But yes, it's food supply.
hmm Well, that's interesting because there are very few people in our community that really get into that side of the, you might say, of the food chain or the restaurant business. And so I take my hat off to you, man. That's very unique, and I know you're going to be outrageously successful.
Plan on it.
Tell me this, Rex. Now, a little about your background. Where did you grow up, and what your family? How did Rex get started in the world?
All right, so I'm from Detroit. Um, Grew up in Detroit. My mother and my father from Louisiana, Baton Rouge and Shreveport. So right when I was about born, we moved up to Detroit. So I came up in inner city Detroit. I recall my mother's food being amazing. And just fast forwarding, when I decided to get into the seafood business, I realized that my mother had given me something that was very special to give. It was the ability to cook Creole food. And so upon starting this business, I realized I had all these recipes swirling around in my universe and created a menu. And right now, our menu is being nominated for awards and things of that nature. But
Wow.
growing up in Detroit, I ended up going to Wayne State University. I studied business logistics, went off and got an MBA at Davenport back in 2007. And I was corporate for about 27 years. I worked with GM, Ford, and Chrysler, all in logistics and material supply. And I did a stint in insurance. I was a sales director for Chicago, Michigan, and also North Carolina when I moved here in 2015. Quite a few run as far as corporate experience. And my last corporate stint was as a recruiter, a national recruiter for a company out of Carmel, Indiana, called PMA. I did that up until 2020.
Mm, okay. Recruiter. That sounds like a very interesting. Yeah, but we used to call them headhunters. Yeah.
Headhunters. Back in the days, they call them headhunters. I agree.
Yeah.
Went across the nation recruiting for sales teams. So I
Mm,
did that up until January 2020, right before COVID.
mm. Well, I know I spoke at Wayne State. I don't know if you remember Mark Lane.
Yeah,
Yes, yes.
Mark Lane, but that's why I graduated. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I spoke there a number of times, and there was an entrepreneur in Detroit, Ken Brown, who owned a couple of McDonald's franchises. And so he would bring me up, and I'd come, and I did workshops there for Mark. And it's funny, you always learn something new. I was there. They were doing a tribute to the Tuskegee Airmen. And so when I came in, I gave my name, Herbert Harris. And so she says, oh, are you the son of Herbert Harris? And I did not know there was a Herbert Harris who was a Tuskegee Airman. And so, yeah, so they had the listing of all the airmen. It was a nice display they had. And I said, I did not know. So when I actually went to Tuskegee, that was my last speaking engagement before the pandemic. And I went there, and sure enough, there were like a couple of Herbert Harrises in the among the Tuskegee Airmen. Yeah, yeah,
And that's
yeah, yeah,
very interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, now you have a little echo on your voice there, Mark. Maybe yeah, maybe get
Was
a
it
little,
right?
yeah, little echo. Maybe get a little closer to the mic. Yeah, that might do it. Let's see. Yeah,
I can adjust my mic too.
yeah.
Let's
Now
see.
that's
Let's
better.
see.
Yeah,
Yeah, a
you
little
have,
bit better.
yeah, oh, much better.
Okay.
Yeah, you have one of
I
those
can tell.
radio voices.
I've been
Yeah,
hearing that since I was in junior high school.
you do.
Yeah,
Oh,
one of my teachers said you should go on the radio. I said, I don't want to do it on the radio. But
you would.
I've been hearing that my entire life.
Well, you would be. I mean, you have that kind of voice. See, I have a voice that that you would never mistake me for a radio personality.
That's good.
Yeah. Now, Mark,
If this
what made?
doesn't work out, maybe
Yeah, yeah. You have a second career that may eclipse everything.
appreciate
Now,
that.
what made you make that transition, say, from the corporate world to become an entrepreneur?
That is a great question. So I always wanted to be, I've always dabbled in entrepreneur endeavors. So ever since I was a kid. But in 2020, when I got laid off, I the world shut down. I was 48 years old and I couldn't go out there and get another job. So I figured I might as well exercise my options where I had no options, which is going into entrepreneurship. But I'm gonna tell you what's interesting. About a year before I got laid off, I wrote in a notebook. I said I want to build an empire, but I had no idea how I would. And I was corporate already. You know how it is with corporate. With corporate, you're tied to the job, especially one where I traveled across the United States quite a bit. So when I got laid off, I said, you know what? Now is a good time to start an empire. What happens after that thought is in what? And with what resources? And because I didn't have an idea at that point and no resources, a funny thing happened to me. I was researching industries that were, high worth industries, health, banking, et cetera. And some friends of mine invited me to go up to Charleston, South Carolina. And they said, I said, I'll go with them. But on the way up there, a friend of mine called me who owns a seafood restaurant, a seafood market. And while I was on the phone with him, they overheard me. And they said, ask him about live blue crabs. I had never heard of live blue crabs. I'm from Detroit. All
Yeah.
we know is snow crabs and Alaskan king crabs.
Uh-huh.
Well, I asked him if he had them. He said, yeah. They said, well, get us a couple dozen. When I got off the phone, Doc, I said, what is a live blue crab? He said, oh, man, they're amazing. We grew up catching them in the backyard. I said, really? And one person said something to me that gave me the idea. She said, if somebody brought blue crabs to Charlotte, they'd be rich. And I remembered I wanted to build an empire, and that
Uh-huh.
was the idea. So I ran away with that idea. The next week, I created a post on Facebook that said, who wants live blue crabs delivered to their house? And the thing just blew up. And
Wow.
at that moment, I knew I had a business. So
Wow.
before then, I had no preparation for the business. I had a Chrysler 300 car. I had no refrigerated truck, no building. But that's what I did. I went online, I created a website called livebluecrabdelivery.com.
Uh-huh.
And I let people know if you order crabs on Monday at 2 o'clock, by 2 o'clock, you will get your crabs delivered by Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until somebody pre-ordered crabs that I actually started investing in the business. I used that money from the pre-orders to square my square account, and I went and bought crabs, put them in the trunk of my Price 300 car, went and got some tongs and some bags, and started delivering crabs out of my trunk.
Wow.
That's how it started.
Isn't
That's
that
how it started.
amazing? Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
famous Amos, the chocolate chip cookies.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he kind of started like that. That was his original thought. Eventually, he was actually a talent agent with an agency, and so after he tried them out in the car, he decided to give some little parties at the agency and have different people come and sample them. And as they say, the rest is history. Yeah.
It's history.
Mhm. Yeah.
There you go.
But Rex, that's interesting, man, because most people don't approach a business like that. In other words, you really let the business create itself. you saw a need and you fulfilled it. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
yeah. Wow.
And to
And
take it a step further, go
uh-huh.
ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go
And
ahead.
take a step further. I came from background in logistics and supply chain management. And so when I got the idea to go into the business, I said, I want to play in that space in distribution, processing, and going to the ships and getting the seafood off of the boats. But I didn't have the resources. So what I said was, what can I do to build a business and then eventually get into the supply chain? And I rented a lease space. The building I'm in actually right now, bought a refrigerated truck, and all of this was done off of flipping live blue crabs.
Uh-huh.
And so the one thing led to another, and that story about my mother being Creole, when I decided to build a restaurant in the same building, all those recipes started to swirl around in my head. Now they ended up being on my menu.
Wow. Now that's a lesson every entrepreneur to be needs to take a listen to this because that has number one, you let the demand drive the business. You said, let me do my Facebook post. People see it. You literally take the orders and, as they say, use the orders to finance the business, okay, to finance acquiring the product. And then you did something I call the Goliath, the David and Goliath. You know, when David confronted Goliath, he didn't run out and get a quick course in giant killing, you know. But
Correct.
David did. He looked at what his skill set. He had a slingshot. He was crafty. He had killed a bear or a lion, and he looked for five soft, smooth stones. And stones are the things you know for sure. You know, your faith, those basic core principles. And that's really what you did. You had supply chain background, so you
Yeah.
understood logistics. You know, without that, I don't know. It would be a challenge because I see so many restaurants don't really understand the supply. It's like I've actually seen restaurant people in the
Sure.
grocery store buying chicken wings.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so you took what you had, that logistics background from corporate America, your mother's recipes for making the Cajun food, that
Right.
Louisiana, that special taste. And then you
There you
stepped
go.
out on faith to get a building to put the whole thing together. And that's a
Totally
beautiful
on faith.
recipe. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my second career was in sales and marketing.
Hmm.
So literally nothing that I've done is in vain. Like I'm using everything that I've ever experienced.
Mm,
And that's the power of having no options because I have to totally rely on what I've done, my experiences, and my ability to figure things out.
mm.
So it's
Now
been a
you
great journey. Yeah.
now you just said something. Your ability to figure things out. Now that is a gift, and that's something that now that's a gift. That ability, where do you think you got that talent, that ability to figure things out? Because a lot of people don't have that ability. They can read and they can follow directions, but to synthesize and
Mhm.
figure stuff out, where did you get that gift?
I believe it's my why, my determination.
Mm-hmm.
Like things drive me. Once they drive me, I don't care what the obstacles are. I'm going to try to. I
Mm,
remember a time when it was 1980. I was 9 years old, and I wanted some Nike Airs. It just came out from Nike. They were like $70. I went to my
mm-hmm.
mother. I said, "Ma, I want these gym shoes." She said, "How much they cost?" I said, $70. She said, "Are you crazy?" She's like, "I can't afford that." I said, well, "Can I get a job?" She said, "Yeah, you can go down the street and go to the newspaper stand." Like, fortunately for me, the newspaper stand was right down the block from my house. So I went down there, and I was 9. He's supposed to have been 12 years old to work as a paper boy.
Mm-hmm.
But I must have been so convincing to the guy that I talked to that he gave me a route, and
Mm,
the route ended up being on my street. The long story short, I started doing this route, and I was trying to collect, and no one was paying me because they kept telling me, come back, this, that, and the other. So what I did was I started collecting every day, going to school, coming back from school. If I saw some car there, so they got tired of me showing up, so they made sure they had money for me. next thing I decided to do was I decided to ask them where they want newspapers. I say, you want it on your porch? You want it on the front lawn? You want me to hand it through the door? And they told me, and they started giving me tips. And the last iteration I did was because I wasn't making a lot of money because paper boys don't make a lot of money. The station does.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, I got to do this faster. So instead of going up the block and back down the block, I started crisscrossing to cut my time. I convinced the guy who ran the newspaper station to let me get another route. So he
Mm.
gave me another route on the next block over, and I was able to eventually buy my own gym shoes at 9 years old. So I
Wow.
was just driven to buy those gym shoes.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to be Magic Johnson, so I needed the kind of shoes. He
But
was also a Michigan man.
yeah, but Rex, you don't really. When you were saying that, I was a paper boy also, man. We got up early
Yeah,
in the morning and rolled the papers and
yes,
rode the
yeah.
bicycle and threw the
And
papers
those
on the
Sunday
porch.
papers was no joke. Those
No
Sunday
joke,
papers
man.
were fair, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then you had to get it done before you go to church. So you had to go out, get the papers out, then come back, change
Yeah,
clothes.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and, and
exactly.
my mother was the organist, so I had to be there.
You had to be there.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Ah,
There you go.
I wish for our young people that we could get that sense that of
Yes,
doing with
yeah,
what you have, working with what you have to make it to get what you want. Wow.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when you started out in the corporate area, a lot of times people get stuck there. Did you have a big vision for, your corporate, I guess your corporate career? Were there times you doubted yourself when you weren't sure that, you could make it in that particular area? Did doubt ever undermine some of your advancement, even when you were in the corporate arena?
I really doubt. I think the biggest issue I had was trying to play the game of corporate. Because I came from Detroit. So
Mhm.
when I was coming up, when you got into corporate America, you couldn't be yourself. So I kind of
Mm,
created this duality, and I struggle with that. That's what made me want to do well in corporate, but it also made me want to get out of corporate and do my own thing.
mhm,
And so if I had doubts, it was how could I keep up trying to relate to people who I didn't grow up with? You see what I'm
mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
And that was my only issue. But as far as being motivated to be, to be promotable, I had
Uh-huh.
no problem there.
Mm. Okay. So just figuring out how to play the game. Yeah, I got
How to
you.
play the game. I
Yeah.
struggled with how to play the game. I didn't start being around people that were not black until I went to Wayne State, really,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then we had a diversity there.
Well, I think a lot of people in the other people, a lot of people don't understand that. It has never occurred to them, that we could live in a culture where we never ever talk to a white person. Like I
Exactly.
remember when I was when I'd gone to college, I went to college in New York, and a an interviewer, a reporter was interviewing me, and he was saying, how was it coming from the segregated South to an Ivy League school? And I said, I really don't know. I never really talked to a white person, until I got to New York. I was 16 years old, and he couldn't. Well, how do you? I don't understand that. But I guess that's just how divided, how separated the races are, and the cultures, not just the race, but the culture also. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. It's getting better because our culture is everyone's culture now.
Yes,
So we can
yes,
all relate to each other in corporate America. So it's
yes.
different challenges.
Wow. Now, when you made that transition to become an entrepreneur, so you didn't have any big financing, you literally had to self finance. Yeah,
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 pretty much.
yeah.
I got a small severance package from my last job before I got laid off. But that
Uh-huh.
was just to live off of. You remember, COVID hit us really hard. It shut everything down.
Yes.
So I had to live off my severance and figure out how I was going to, more or less fend for myself on the other side of COVID.
Many times I find that people don't don't have that ability to separate the money, you might say, to really focus on the money that's necessary to grow the business. You know, the old what was the fella Hugh Hefner, when he was growing Playboy, he didn't
Okay.
have any money, and he had an
Oh,
idea, and so he had an idea for a magazine. He didn't have any money for an office and a home, so he gave up his apartment and lived in the office. Okay. He didn't have any
yeah.
money to hire staff, and so he wrote all the articles himself and put different names on them. And then he'd
He
go
did
to
what
the
he had to do, right?
then he'd go to the restaurants and like give this idea that he was a food critic and got free food. Yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
that's innovative. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So now,
I
as you
tell you
think,
what, when you're,
uh huh.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, man, when you're really thirsty to be successful, it really stretches you to figure out how to make it happen. And that's when the ideas and all the juices start to flow. And I love being in that space, you know. You
Yeah.
mentioned in your book a space called super consciousness.
Yes.
And I always say supernatural, a space where anything is possible.
Yes.
And I'll tell you what, I started to kind of live in this energy space, literally everything is possible. And when I wrote in that book, when I wrote down I want to build an empire, January 19th, 2019, I was literally living in my car.
Mm.
That was my home at the time. So I really had no options but to survive. You know, even having a corporate job, things that got kind of bad for me. So I had to figure out a way with everything I had to take an inventory of myself and said, I'm going to figure out how to build an empire. I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I am going to do it.
Wow. Well, that's a life lesson right there, man, because your why, your desire is really that driving force.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
And it can be undeniable if you
Yeah.
don't doubt yourself. And I learned how to deal with doubt by being excited about challenges. Like I
Mm.
like challenges. I got
Mm.
no problem with challenges whatsoever. I don't learn from success. I've been successful all my entire life. I just learned was it's what I expect. Challenges stretch you in a different kind of way that success don't.
Yes.
It's just a mindset change.
Yeah. Well, the challenges make you grow. If you have no challenges, you're probably not doing anything important. Yeah.
Exactly. Couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
Now, as got into this entrepreneur area, did you did you encounter distractions, and how do you deal with distractions, things that pull you off course?
Well, you know, when you get it, you become an entrepreneur, man. You just want to knock it out the park. You make all these projections. By this month, this quarter, I'm gonna be doing this, this, and this. And so when it doesn't happen, you got to regroup. And that's where the battle on the inside came in. So when I had like lack of sales, I would make changes to my menu. I'd add things, and they wouldn't really kick off. I had to sit back and start learning how to be patient and say, well, if you add something new, you expect people to come right away because with social media, you can connect with your audience really quick, right? I can post something today, I got a special, and tomorrow they're all coming in. But they didn't know me that way in the beginning, and I had to let this thing kind of kind of play out, like run its course. Then I started understanding that if I introduce something new to the marketplace, I got to figure out how long it takes for them to actually see it, for the process in their head, and for them to actually make a decision to come in and purchase. See what I'm saying? I had
Mhm.
to learn my target audience and learn what they wanted and things like that. So it was just total trial and error, but it was always a battle on the inside of me. I want things yesterday, but
Yeah,
life doesn't work that way.
yeah.
You know?
Now that's a great point, because I think all of us go through that. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah, we think we just put it out there and they'll be come running to the door.
Exactly.
But I guess that's kind of that brand consciousness, that when
Yeah.
people know who you are and trust who you are, then when you put up the post, they come a running. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, and building a brand is where it's at. You know, I never went out to build self-employment. replace income.
Uh-huh.
From the beginning, I wanted to build brands. I wanted to build my my LLC into being an actual company that had companies up under it.
Uh-huh.
So it was never about just replacing my income. For me, it's not about money. For me, it's about building something that's exceptional.
Wow.
And so that just takes time. You know what I'm saying? It takes being very motivated over a long period of time and being consistent and then iterating as I go along. You see what I'm saying? And so no distractions for me. It's just my expectations are really, really high.
Mm. Yeah. Very interesting. Man, there are a lot of entrepreneurs that really need to take a page out of your playbook. You said something about patience. You know that that you have to monitor your results, figure out how long it takes between the time you post something and when people see it and respond to it. That patience is a powerful piece. You know, that's I think that's something that many people don't they have to develop it if they're going to ever become successful.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And it's just a matter of just taking time to oneself. Like all the
mm,
battles happen on the inside.
absolutely.
I've had to, and I've always had anxiety because I've always been hyper motivated and driven. And so in this season, I can see it happening without actually seeing tangible evidence today. I just know it's happening. See what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Because I put in the work.
Well, that's that like that farmer mentality. Everything has a season, and
Yeah,
if you
for
plant
sure.
corn, no matter how hungry you are, you cannot eat corn next week. It takes you
Right.
about 60 days to
Right.
grow corn.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson that I think many people struggle with, because they're so driven by their need that they can't see that whatever it is they're after has a cycle of its own.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Very
Now,
true.
now, is it important to have a team? Have you been able to put a team together? How necessary,
Yeah.
and how have you been able to do that?
Yeah. I do have a team and I put it together because of my vision.
Hmm.
I share my vision everywhere I go. I don't hide my intentions. I
Hmm.
was once told that if you need help with something, speak loud enough and tell enough people, somebody's going to join and help you.
Yes.
See what I'm saying? So, team is important, but it's all about sharing vision. And I always believe the speed of the leader, speed of the team. And so when I bring people in, I'm gonna do everything first. If I want to ask you to do it, unless I do it, and I do everything very fast.
Mm.
What I mean by that is I've kind of coined this phrase cheating time. And I've actually created different techniques in the kitchen to where we can do something made to order that's complicated and have it out in a certain amount of time. Everything is set up a certain kind of way where it makes sense. There's no crossing each other in my kitchen in the restaurant. And so I just created a winning environment, one that's smart, one that makes sense, and one that's always changing for the better. So I
Mm.
have a team now and I'm looking to build, add more to it. I have my kids come in. I'm teaching them how the business works, and they don't just come in just to play around. We get serious about what we do
How old are your kids?
here. My son is 6, and I got 14-year-old twins, identical twin girls, and I got 2 older daughters that still live up north. One's
Uh,
in grad school. She's 25. I got a senior in high school in Detroit. She's 18. She's 17.
okay. Well, bringing the kids into business is critical, because there's so
I
many.
couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, they all know that I'm building this business for them. I'm real
Uh-huh.
big on legacy businesses because we didn't grow up that way. We didn't grow up with mom, and dad building a business for us. And so it's my contention to build this for my children and also spread the news that this is what we should be doing, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that's very important. And it teaches them about, finances, marketing, inventory, you know what I'm saying? Things that we didn't learn coming up. We had to learn them in corporate America.
Mm. I'm hearing something also, Rex. many times people go into business who don't have, the MBA. Sometimes folks say, well, you don't need all that. But as I listen to you, it's been a plus to have it because it really, I think, gave you a bigger picture of how to build your dream. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I hate to give it credit because I feel like I would have learned it anyway.
Uh-huh.
But I could draw from just the exposure to concepts and ideas,
Hmm.
but they're just concepts and ideas unless you go out and apply them. And so I've been able to kind of glean from the ideas and I go out there and actually apply them in corporate America. So yeah, I think an MBA has helped me. However, I don't think my children should necessarily go to grad school unless they go on to higher education for medical medicine
Hmm.
or for law. Other than that, their mothers are also entrepreneurs, so they can learn a lot from us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. So it's a family business.
As far as I'm concerned, it's always going to be a family business. Yeah.
Beautiful,
I've got
beautiful.
a partner of mine down in Georgia. It's a
Uh-huh.
funny story. I'll be quick. 28 years ago, he was in Detroit and he said, I'm gonna open up me a wing spot. I said, what are you gonna call this place? He said, Wood Swinging Wings. I said, well, go ahead and do that thing, man. So you gonna do it in Detroit? He said, no, I'm going down to Americus, Georgia and build it. Long story short, a year later after he built it, his son was born. And now 25 years later, it still exists. Now his son is running the business and he's passing the torch to his son.
Wow.
I tell him all the time, you don't understand what you did there. He's
Yeah.
like, what are you talking about? I said, dude, you did it the way a lot of other communities do it.
Uh-huh.
And now his son, who's also an airline pilot, he can
Uh-huh.
go and work for American Airlines as a pilot, but he wants to run dad's business and then take dad's business and put it in airports.
Uh-huh.
I said, you see, your son has information and technology that he has knowledge of that you don't. So now it's time to pass the torch so you can take that
Wow.
name and move it further. You see
Yes.
what I'm saying? That's
Yes.
magical to be able to hand your child a business.
Well, Rex, that's the stuff that's really our community needs that, the legacy business, because
Oh,
it seems like
yes,
every
yes,
generation starts at zero. you know, no,
yeah.
yeah. And when you have that legacy
Couldn't
business,
agree more.
yeah, I start at zero, I get to 100. Then my son can start at 100, he can get to 300. Then his son can start
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
Well, when you
yeah,
look at those wealthy families, most of them were not created in one generation. Maybe that first
no,
generation made the money, or the second generation made the big money, and then the other
yeah,
generations built on that. Yeah, man.
yeah. Because the new generations have new information and new energy.
Yes,
You know what I'm saying? They can take that baton and take it further. And really, I mean, legacy building is really the cure solving the racism in America
there you go.
to give us a head start. It really is, right?
Yes,
It's the only
yes.
thing you really can't control.
Well, growing up in the South, and we saw when I was a kid, we had everything was black. The black cab company, the black restaurant, the black tailor. I mean, that was the way it was. The contractors, the construction people, and over the years, it seems that the education system has taken them away from the trades and those type of things that can be the underpinning for a community. So the money doesn't circulate because there's nothing to circulate for. Mm, wow.
But the education was a lure because of federal student loans.
Yeah.
And so we're handing our children off to higher education and taking on all this debt to go ask somebody to build their legacy business.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not working. It's not working for us.
Yeah. Well, that whole student loan, that's one of the few debts I don't think you can discharge it in bankruptcy. You know, they, they come they come get you in
Be
heaven or
safe.
hell. Yeah, wherever you at, they're coming for you.
I
Wow.
know. Well,
Yeah.
unfortunately, Generation X has got the biggest amount of student loan debt to this day.
Isn't that amazing?
$508 billion in Generation X.
Wow.
That's a tragedy. This
Yeah.
baby boomers that still got big federal student loan debt.
Yeah. 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 And you
So
know what?
legacy building is
But legacy building is the key. Legacy
key.
building, self-finance, to learn how to really finance your business, finance yourself. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
when you look back, you've had I like the route, you've kind of gone the traditional route and moved on to the entrepreneurial route. If you look back on where you are right now, what advice would you give your younger self starting out, your younger self starting out? Mhm.
That's a great question. I would have stuck with one thing. I've had 3, 4 careers. If I would start out again, I would probably just go straight into entrepreneurship and just the concept of flipping money. I've
Uh-huh.
always been an entrepreneur since I was a kid. So I would probably just use my money, kept flipping and found me an industry. I was very interested early on in real estate. I did a lot of real estate in my 20s.
Uh-huh.
Flipping houses here and there. I just kept doing that. So I'll give my advice to my younger self to find you something that creates your own money that you like. Just
Mm-hmm.
continue with that.
Mm. To create that independent cash
I'm
flow.
gonna tell you something too.
Mm.
I like that question. I get asked that question a lot. But
Mhm.
I say I would rather talk to my older self. I'm
Yes.
51. I'd rather talk to my 71-year-old self and ask him what I should be doing right now, provide the lifestyle he wants at 71 years old. Because he's going to want to be healthy enough to enjoy what he's built. He's going to
Yes.
want to be able to give off his business to his children. He's going to want to be financially set up. He's going to want to be able to give back and be charitable. And so I got to get my body right, my mind right, my spirit right to be able to take this next 20 years and meet that guy at 71 and be what he wants me
Well, Rex, that was the next question, man. Of all the interviews
to
I've ever done,
be. uh,
no, nobody's ever figured out the next question but you.
yeah, you got to
Yeah.
go that way. The
Yeah.
past is
Yeah.
important, but I live in the future. And
Uh-huh.
if I don't think about the future, I can't prepare for it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing that's creating a lot of stress. We had coming in that era of like the 70s, the 60s, and the 70s, where especially people of color were beginning to move into corporate America. I had a contract once with Lucent Technology, and they were trying to figure,
Mhm.
they had really gone on an aggressive campaign to get more people of color into the engineering departments out there
Yeah,
in Illinois. Yeah. And
yeah.
but one of the things they couldn't, it seemed like everybody had gotten into come into the business, but it got into like a almost like a ceiling point. And
Mhm.
they were surprised that none of them wanted to go into management. None of them wanted to, like go to the next level in the corporation. Although they had good paying jobs, they never did see where they wanted to go up the corporate ladder. I mean, when you even if you're an engineer, there's still a corporate structure above you, but nobody ever wanted to go above that corporate structure. And they really, it puzzled them. And we looked at it too, and we had some conclusions about it. But it was, what you have done is so rare, because most of them, I'll tell you what's happening with many of them right now. Some of my old buddies from IBM, et cetera, these companies have figured out ways to like put you out the pasture. Okay, if you thought you were gonna
Yes.
work all the way to the end of whatever your work life was, that's not the case. So I've seen people who've worked for an IBM or another major company for 25, 30 years, and then basically saying, if you don't take that package, then it's just a certain amount of time before you're going to be leaving there, maybe 2 or 3 months severance pay, but out into a world that you don't even relate to anymore because you've been so busy in this corporate structure. And so what you've done, I think, is going to be a blueprint, because there are a lot of other, especially people of color, that in this particular climate in America right now, you can kind of see as different state legislatures are boxing in the education, I think that something happened with when George Floyd, uh, when that experience took place, it became very obvious how many people of color, how many black folks were in high political positions, high governmental positions. And it's almost like a certain part of the country took a response to it. And so you can see in many states now, there's legislatures that are restricting education, that are boxing folks in, that are cutting back on voting rights, etc. And so I'm
Yeah,
predicting that over the next 20 years, we're gonna the foundation is laid for what happened in this country, in America, that period 19, let's just say 1900 through about 19, through the Great Depression. And that was an era where you had a lot of black folks who was Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Atlanta, Georgia. And, this capitulation where people are not able now to go up the structure as they were able to do before. Like there were more black men in medical school in 1970 than they are right now. One of the doctors shared that with me. And so many folks are going to be coming out of this corporate era almost unprepared. And so what you have done is really going to be a blueprint to take what you've learned in the corporate arena and now apply it on the battlefield of life.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
think the key right now for us too, we all see the issue, but the
Mhm.
solution is us coming together with our resources on one accord.
Mm.
I created a culture called nuclearpreneur mindset,
Mhm.
and it's the nuclear concept of family and entrepreneurship, and I combine the words.
Mhm.
And basically, what it means is building family, business, and community together.
Mhm.
I want buy-in because what it alludes to, number one, is possibility. Number two, collaboration. Number three, and let's come together for that entire journey. Like
Mm.
I'd like to see us start to date with business building in mind,
Mm.
family business in mind, community building in mind. Because in the black community, that's really what's missing, right?
Yeah.
We come together for other reasons than what makes sense for our children, which is to build together and to see the cohesiveness and going through these trials of building the business together and overcoming them and how that works.
Mm.
So that
Wow.
to me is the solution to the race problem in America.
Yes.
Um, I don't see, to your point about a lot of folks who do all these jobs for 20, 30 years. When I was a national recruiting manager, I saw resumes of people who were CEOs, controllers, you know what I'm saying, high management, no longer employable at
Mm.
55 years old. And they wanted to be an insurance agent, and you could have a GED, get a license to be an insurance agent, and they were going to be the equivalent of those people. And I
Wow.
said, something's wrong with this. Something's wrong
Yeah.
with this.
Yeah.
And so gone are the days where you can work somewhere 35, 40 years, have a great retirement, benefits paid, etc. Now we really have to fend for ourselves, and building a legacy business is the way.
Wow. And I think, that profit is going to always eventually seek itself. That everybody wants to make a profit. If there was such a thing as compassionate capitalism, well, there was a time when corporations had that family nature about them, like you're saying, that
Loyalty,
yeah,
yeah,
that kind of nuclear nature. And so when so that when an employee had a challenge or a problem, and even a tenant had a problem, there was a personal relationship there. And you say, well, Rex, I know your job got cut back, you're a seasonal worker, but you've been my tenant for X number of years. I know you'll catch up in the spring, as soon as the weather breaks. That's gone now. I was looking at,
strong.
many of these corporations are buying nice houses and renting them. And fellow rented a house and the toilets don't even work. And I mean, high dollar house. And there's nobody to contact. There's no agent. It's like send an email, send a text, you know.
Right.
And so I think they've taken the humanity out of the equation. And I think in search of absolute profit rather than compassionate profit. And it's going to be a
Yeah,
change.
corporate
So,
America.
yeah.
Yeah, corporate America is very narcissistic, ego-driven now, and it's a game you can play. And I mentioned earlier about the duality. Well, it doesn't. You don't have to be such a try to fit in as much as you used to,
Uh-huh.
but your opportunities or limitations of your opportunities still really exist for Black folks in corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
Still have those. I got to work harder to get, to a parallel position with other people in the business. So
Yes.
I
Well,
tell my kids all the time, do
uh-huh.
what you, tell me what your passion is, and let's go that way.
Yes.
And the earlier you figure that out, the better off you're going to be.
Wow. Well, I tell you, Rex, we have had a great discussion today, man. I think
I've enjoyed it.
yeah, you've laid out some nuggets and another side of the business arena. You know, you really have shared information that a lot of folks coming out of corporate America, folks coming out of a job they thought would have forever, and now the job has been shipped to wherever, and that
Yeah.
people are going to have to fend for themselves out of necessity. And I think you have laid out a beautiful blueprint, man. So, where you said now you want to build a global brand, what's the next step for your company now?
All right, so the next step is I got these concepts in house. I'm going to build franchises of my dinner restaurant is called Seafood Boil and Sea. So it's
What's
Cajun Creole seafood, seafood boil and sea,
okay?
and that's up under my parent company, which is MI Products.
Uh-huh.
And I want to build the Seafood Boil and Sea brand and start putting it in demographic areas where it's more fluent. I got
Uh-huh.
a Cajun breakfast joint brand, which is my breakfast. I don't know if you ever heard of Eggs Up Grill. It's kind of an Eggs Up Grill, but it's Cajun
Uh-huh.
breakfast concept. We're going to build that outside of here. Got a seafood market. I got a lot of resources to get seafood off the coast. So we're going to build that brand out. I
Uh-huh.
got 30 products, sauces, spices, and recipes that can actually go in stores. Working on that aspect.
Uh-huh.
And then distribution of seafood. So I've been talking to the folks in Morehead City about building a processing center off the coast that covers seafood coming in from South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia.
Mm.
Unfortunately, right now, most of the seafood that comes off the coast gets sold to Asia. Asia processes it, packages it, and sells it back to America. But over there, we have no idea. There's no one over there inspecting, right? There's
Right.
no inspectors from America going over there in other
Yeah.
parts. So we don't have that kind of control over our seafood once it leaves the shores of the Gulf. So I want to
Wow.
be the solution to the problem.
Yes.
And I'm putting together a 5-year plan to be able to get into processing seafood off the coast that goes inland and also brings more money into the Carolinas inland.
Beautiful.
So that's just a few things that we're working on. But I innovate, I create. I think probably the tag I like the most is product developer because I like developing products, businesses, systems, cultures, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow. Well, Rex, I tell you, that's a big vision, man. You just shared that's a whole
Okay.
nother line about so much stuff. Like the same thing's happening here in North Carolina with the pig plant. So I think the Chinese folks
Okay.
bought Smithfield Processing, and so they get the pigs here, ship them to China, process, and then send it back. You know, there must be a huge wage differential for that to be profitable. You know?
I know exactly. Things
Wow.
ain't light, right? So the
Yeah.
money they spend, but we consume so much of it.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense that we don't keep all that stuff, so to speak, in house off the golf course.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Rex, any advice? We're gonna wrap up now. I think we've covered. Now, I sent you a copy of the book, and you you're one of those people that the moment you got it, seems like you open the book and start cracking. Any
And I couldn't
any
put it
thoughts?
down.
Okay, yeah.
I'm gonna tell you what I like about your book. I couldn't disagree with anything,
Mhm.
right? And you talked about there's a person in that book, and I think that person is you, right?
Mm,
And because you hit on different things, like you're a player in the game, right? If you're a player in the game, you're also super conscious. You see what
hmm.
I'm saying?
Yes.
You're on that line of a high achiever, which is why you wrote the book, because you have so much experience.
Uh-huh.
So there's nothing in that book that I could disagree with. There was one thing I actually used from that book, and I don't write things down, but I do know when I do, they come true.
Uh-huh.
So I got a board in the back of my office, and I wrote down my 2023 plans that I normally keep up here. I wrote it on that board in specifics. These dates, we're going to do this, and this is what it's going to net as far as generating sales.
Yes.
And I did do that from the book. I'm on page 123, I believe.
Okay.
Great book.
Wow.
Good read,
Wow.
man.
Thank you,
And
my
I love
friend.
to write, but I hate to read. But your book, it's a good one. I actually started reading your other book too, Solving the Race Issue in America. I'm about 12 pages in on that one too.
Yes, yes. Well, it's funny.
Yeah,
People look
good
at
one.
them as different books, but there are a lot of similarities. The
No
the
similarities.
yeah, the mind. It's all in our minds. So whatever we're experiencing, be it abundance or racism, it's all coming right out of our minds. Yep. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. So
But
advice I would give would be there's nothing we do in life that's in vain. We literally, if we take an inventory of ourselves and put ourselves out there and not be a wanderer or a wanderer, we actually
mhm,
start getting close to that playing field, we'll
yes.
see we got more in us. For those who don't want to go down that road, you're wasting all your experiences. Because we can create magic.
Yes.
We really can.
Wow. Well, Rex, I have enjoyed this, man. We're gonna have to do some more stuff because I'm
I'm done.
fascinated, just to see a person bridge that gap from that corporate world into the entrepreneur world and to bring that same type of long-term planning. That's very often as when you look at the value of, say, the MBA to school, is that gives you a long-term planning. Many years ago, I worked for Time Magazine, and they were getting ready to start a new magazine. But anyway, they had laid out a 5-year projection, you know, of how they were going to make this whole thing happen. Number one, and two, had the financing in place for the whole 5-year projection when they decided to start the magazine. And that type of
Mm.
long-term thinking, just as you were laying out your branding and whatnot, I don't know that you can get that kind of self-generated. Like that having that formal business education gives you a nice framework. We can figure a lot of that out, but it's a whole lot easier to get on a train than to lay track. So
I
so
agree with that.
yeah, so that might be a nice little, for those who are looking at it. um, I notice as entrepreneurs now, you'll find many people who started entrepreneurs now are beginning to go back to these specialized certificates in business schools. I know here in Wilmington, we have a
Okay.
thing where to give you that kind of bigger picture that you may not get from, doing the business that you're doing. You may be making tons of money, but to see that bigger picture of bigger structure, that 10-year plan, So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, the planning is easy when you're having fun, man. You're
Yeah.
gonna let those 5 years anyway. You might as well have fun while you're doing
now,
it.
now that's a word to the wise. The
You
whole
might as well have fun while you're doing
That's it. Well,
it. Yeah.
thank you so much for being with us, Rex. We appreciate you. We honor the insight you've shared, man, and thanks for your experience. And we know that you're gonna be rising up to do great things. I know we're gonna see you written up somewhere and say, yeah, well, that's a friend of mine.
All
Beautiful.
right, well, I'm
All
accepting
right.
it. I'll take it. Appreciate you. Yeah, thank you for this. I appreciate
You
this.
are so
Anytime you
absolutely. And to our listeners, today you've heard really a different side of business and entrepreneurship. It's rare that you have a person like Rex, who's come from the formal business arena, the MBA, the work in corporate America, and then who can make that switch, that translation to become an entrepreneur and to bring all those skills from the business school, the college, to bring the skills from his mother's cooking, to bring the skills from his own personal development skills, and to put it to work. So this is one you want to listen to over and over, because I guarantee you that you have some of those same skills inside you. You have education that you haven't been using, and now let Rex inspire you to take what you have to get what you want. Always knowing that you can be what you want to be, do what you want to do, and have anything you desire. Always knowing that the best is yet to come. And so it is.